I'd like to call the Butte-Silver Council of Commissioners regular meeting for Wednesday, March 19th, 2025 to order. Clerk, could we please?
11 present, 1 absent.
11 present, 1 absent. 1 absent. Please note that Commissioner Fisher is absent from tonight's agenda. Commissioner Walker, could you lead us in the prayer and the pledge?
Almighty God, we implore you, look upon us and guide us this night as we make decisions which so greatly affect our community of Butte-Silver. Direct our thoughts, words, and deeds so that we please you and best serve our fellow citizens.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we'll move to any public comment on any item on the agenda tonight. Please come forward, state your name, your address, and what you'd like to speak about. And when you do, please understand we're going to keep public comment to 3 minutes tonight. So on this, there'll be a light, it turns green. At 1.5 minutes, it turns yellow. And then when it turns red, the 3 minutes is up. So if anyone would like to come forward, speak on any item on the agenda, please. Marilyn, there we go.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Marilyn Patrick. I live at 11 Wathena Drive, which is in the Spoler Addition out on Timber Butte. I just recently learned that a Mr. John Jeffrey has asked Butte-Silver to purchase a 1.67 acre piece of property out in the Spoler Addition, which has been a green area since I moved in 45 years ago. I am requesting that Butte-Silver reconsider selling Mr. Jeffrey this piece of property. This piece of property is not conducive to any type of development, especially the housing that he wants to put in. The second access to my area, currently there's only one road in and one road out. The secondary access is nothing but decomposed granite. And in order to create a road, a secondary access into this area, would require blasting of the decomposed granite and or jackhammering. I do not want to see my piece of paid-for property that I have bought and paid for and that I own with my husband to have any destruction to this home as well as others in the area. Last year, when that gas line was being put in above or south of our property, it required jackhammering for weeks on end. They could not dig to put that gas line in. And I know that that piece of property and the access that's going to be required to get people in and out again is going to require that same amount of blasting and jackhammering. I'm asking that you reconsider selling this property, and perhaps my family or another family interested in the area might buy that property and keep it a green space for that addition. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Rod Underwood. I live at 20 Lumberjack Road in Butte. I'm speaking on behalf of my son, Ryan Underwood, who lives at 227 Mammoth Drive. He can't be here tonight. He's with his 15-year-old daughter who is going through cancer treatment. My son asks, has the neighbors in the area been thought of in this at all? Have they been talked to or let know what's going on? Most people bought the property because there was a park across the street. Ryan would ask if the council to deny the sale of this property due to lack of due diligence as far as accessibility to water and sewer and existing property lines. Has there been a traffic study? If the sale is a must, we ask that the commissioners open it to contractors' bid. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening, Commissioners. My name is John Sorich, 1820 Wilson. I want to speak about Jim Fisher's communication that's going to go to Committee of the Whole next week. He's not here. House Bill 547, I believe it has some good points. You know, as a commissioner, as a volunteer, as a taxpayer, there is some lack of continuity amongst our groups. And for us to move forward, I think we need to be a positive. I think that's a great step to get that continuity. Do I see it in my 20 years as a volunteer with the fire services? Do I see eliminating volunteers? Absolutely not. I don't see it. You know, but I do see that we need some changes. That was 1977 when this has come through. I think it's a positive step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sorge. Is there any other public comment on any item on the agenda tonight?
I'm Patrice Evans. I live at 233 Mammoth Drive, right next to these people. And I've lived there for nearly 20 years now. I bought the property because I was told the property in front of us was going to be a park. If you guys my view is Butte. When I moved back to Butte, the reason why I moved back to Butte is because I heard too many people say the best way to see Butte's in your rearview mirror. Every time I pull in my garage now, I see Butte in my rearview mirror, and I don't want to see a bunch of houses there. Like she said already, the access to up there, it's it's terrible trying to get in and out of that place. Also, last summer when they were doing that gas line up there, when they were beating on that thing, my driveway is cracked, my garage is cracked, all crazy because of them beating on there. So she's not exaggerating when she's saying that if somebody's going to come in there and start blasting or pounding, trying to get through that granite to get up there, because it's a solid granite mountain. So I ask that you please reconsider and at least put it up to a bid that would allow us property owners there the opportunity to perhaps buy that together if Butte-Silver isn't willing to keep up with the contract for the park that it was supposed to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on any item on the agenda tonight?
Howdy, Reddy Frost, 2000 Roberts Avenue. I'm not talking about selling property today. My comment is on, let's see, I believe it's 2025-140, the wildlife crossing sign study. Do we really need a study to figure out if we should, like, I feel like the pros of just putting up a sign to tell you to be a little bit more careful in Montana that is overrun with elk and deer and mule deer. Like, it just seems like we could put it up and save the taxpayers some money, and I think you guys have the power to do that. You know, people should slow down and not hit animals. That's never a bad thing, even if we don't need a study to prove it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on any item on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we will move on to the approval of the minutes. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. At this time, I'll make a motion that we approve the March 5th, 2025 regular meeting minutes.
We have a motion and a second to approve the March 5th, 2025 regular meeting minutes. Is there anything on the question? We'll wait for 1 second here. Could commissioners please? And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
11 yea, 0 nay.
11 yeas, 0 nay, motion passes. Moving on to items not addressed on the agenda tonight, we do have one. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. In accordance with the provisions of Rule 7 of the Rules of Order of the Council of Commissioners of the City and County of Butte-Silver Bow, State of Montana, the council hereby finds that an emergency condition exists which requires that the council rules be suspended to allow for final passage on the first reading for communication numbers 25-162, 25-163, and 25-164. The reason for the suspension, to just add these communications to the agenda. We will discuss them in their individual component. Angie Mulliken, Public Works Director, Public Works Department, is requesting authorization to apply for a grant that the grant due date is March 21st. And so with our council meetings, she would not have the appropriate approval to apply for that grant. And then same for communication 2025-164 and communication 25, that was 164, 163. So 3 communications, 25, 162, 163, and 164.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules. Is there anything on the question? Commissioner Morgan, did you make a motion? I don't think you read through the motion. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Motion to approve, I make a motion that we approve the suspension of the rules to add council communication 25-162, 25-163, and council communication 25-164 for the March 19th, 2025 regular meeting.
We have a motion and a second to approve the suspension of the rules. Is there anything on the question? Could commissioners please vote? And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
11 yea, 0 nay.
11 yeas, 0 nay, 0 nay, motion passes. Moving on to the Chief Executive's report. I just got a couple things that I'd like to announce tonight. We got a nice announcement that was sent to our Health Director, Karen Malachny. She sent this out today that I have some exciting news to share with you. The Montana Public Health Association, MPHA, informed her earlier today that Butte-Silver Bow Health Department, as part of the Montana Pathways to Recognition Learning Collaborative, has been selected as an awardee for the 2025 MPHA President's Award. So we want to congratulate the Health Department and Director Malachny for that award. So that's exciting for our Health Department to get that. So. Also, I wanted to talk about moving forward with the community hub. We had our selection process. We had 5 different applications that responded to the RFP on that. We selected 3 to come in and interview and do a presentation to the committee on that. And Water Environmental Technologies was selected as the preferred contractor or engineer and for that project. So we look forward to starting that project. The beginning piece of that will be entering into that contract, but then also a lot of community engagement that will come forward from that. So we're excited about that. There was great presentations, and there's a lot of positive things that can come out of that. And so we're looking forward to getting that process going. So I think we're going to have a pretty busy meeting tonight. So I'm going to close the Chief Executive's report, and we're going to move on to Section 1, bid openings, public hearings, and our presentations. We have 1 bid opening and 1 public hearing. County Attorney, do we have proof of publication?
Chief Executive Gallagher, yes, we have proof of publication.
Thank you, County Attorney and Ruth. So first bid opening, we have communication number 2025-90. Mark Neary, Public Works Director, requesting Council of Commissioners authorization to schedule a bid opening March 19th, 2025 for the Howard Avenue Total Reconstruction Project for the Roads Division. Director Neary.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher and Commissioners. The first bid is from Hollow Contracting in Butte. Looks like we have 4 bids tonight.
We have a bid bond amount in the amount of 10%.
Thank you, County Attorney Enruth.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioners, the total price on this is $655,065. 655,065.
That's $655,065.
The second bid is from 4M Land Improvement out of Ramsey.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioners, we have a bid bond amount in the amount of 10%.
Thank you, County Attorney Enruth.
Chief Executive Gallagher's Commissioners, the total on this bid is $743,581. 743,581.
That's $743,581.
The third bid is from Jeffrey Contracting out of Butte.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioners, we have a bid bond in the amount of 10%.
Thank you, County Attorney Enruth.
Chief Executive Gallagher, the total on this bid is $649,596.50. 649,596.50.
That's $649,596.50.
The final bid is from Montana Materials out of Helena.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioners, we have a bid bond in the amount of 10%.
Thank you, County Attorney Enruth.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioners, the total on this bid is $744,000 even. 744,000.
That's $744,000 even.
That's it.
Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. At this time, I'll make a motion that we refer the Communication 2025-90 to the Public Works Department and await their recommendation.
We have a motion and a second to refer communication number 2025-90 to the Public Works Department. Is there anything on the question? Could commissioners please vote? Do you want just a thumbs up? Okay. And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote, and Commissioner Anderson gave a thumbs up.
11 yea, 0 nay.
11 yea, 0 nay. 11 yea, 0 nay. Motion passes. Moving on to public hearings, we have one, communication number 2025-122. County Attorney, do we approve publication of this, on this as well?
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioners, yes, we have proof of publication.
Thank you, County Attorney Enruth. So, communication number 2025-122. Karen Malachny, Butte-Silver Health Officer, requesting Council of Commissioners authorization to schedule a public hearing on March 19, 2025, for the purpose of amending the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget to allow for increased expenditures of unanticipated revenue resulting from a contract award with the Montana Department of Health and Human Services in the amount of $102,499. Director Malakny.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher, and members of council. For the record, my name is Karen Malakny, Health Officer for Butte-Silver. I'm here this evening to ask permission to amend the 2024-25 fiscal year budget in the amount of $102,499. This is for unanticipated revenue we received from a contract from DPHHS for our HIV prevention services.
Thank you, Director Malakny. Is there any questions of commissioners? Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Karen, on this public hearing, there is a resolution later in the agenda for this particular one, so just wanted the council to know that. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Morgan. Is there any other questions of commissioners? Seeing none, I'll open the public hearing. First call for proponents.
Reddy Frost, 2000 Roberts Avenue, and I'm in favor of this.
Thank you, Mr. Frost. Second call for proponents. Third and final call for proponents. Next, I'll move to opponents. First call for opponents. Second call for opponents. Third and final call for opponents. I'll close the public hearing. Next, we'll move on to presentations. We have one tonight. Item number 3, communication number 2025-80, Zach Osborne, Butte-Silver Bowl Fire Chief, requesting Council of Commissioners authorization to schedule a presentation on March 19th to present a final draft of a long-range master plan for the Butte-Silver Bowl Fire Department. Is Director Osborne here? The Director of Fire Services.
Chief Executive Gallagher, members of the commission. Thank you, all the commissioners, for approving this funding for this study, and thank you for ESCI for the work on behalf of the Butte Fire Department and ultimately our taxpayers and our citizens. So this was long overdue, and I'm glad it's finally finished and we're able to get the presentation tonight. So we have 2 members from ESCI, and they can give the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Osborne. Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you for having us here, Chief Executive and the commissioners. We're from ESCI, which is Emergency Services Consulting International. I am Mike Hogan, and this is
Mike Chambers.
And tonight we're here to present that master plan. So what a master plan is basically, you can think of that as a long-term roadmap. The report that has been sent out. That report is very long. It's about 170 pages long. Today, we're not going to go through that whole report. We're going to focus on the highlights of it, and then allow you to ask questions based on that. So who is ESCI? So ESCI is Emergency Services Consulting International. So what we do is we do these long-term plans, master plans, strategic plans, staffing reports all over the country for career departments, volunteer departments, combination departments. This process started with us coming here on site. So we came here on site for 3 days. We did in-person interviews where we met with stakeholders. Some of you up there we met with. We met with both the career leadership, volunteer leadership, and then other personnel that would help us get the information that we needed for the report. We then had follow-up Zoom calls and meetings as we needed additional information. From there, we developed a draft. That draft was sent out to the career and volunteer staff to review and provide feedback on that. From that, we took the comments on those drafts, and then we compiled a final draft, which was then released. So what I'm going to highlight on is what we recommend. And as we go through these recommendations, these are just recommendations. It's nothing bound by saying that these are the things that you have to do. Basically, we took the information, we compared it with our knowledge and expertise of the fire and emergency services that we have, compared it with best practices, and we presented these here. So number one, and this was a big one that dealt with throughout the report, is improving the career and volunteer relationships. Now, this isn't the relationships of the boots on the ground. The crews, we constantly heard feedback that on the street that the crews work very well together on emergency scenes. This is improving leadership from the collaboration at the leadership spot. And we have a couple things I want to highlight that could help with this that we mentioned in the report is one, training. When you train together, not only does that allow you to improve your skills, but that also is team building as well. Then the next would be establishing a joint committee, both made up of career and volunteer members, to work through some of the differences and to really have that communication established. Because one of the things we did hear from both sides is the communications between the two at the leadership sometimes is not there. And then from there, when conflict does arise, we should have procedures in how we deal with the conflict. Shutting off and not talking with each other is not the way to solve that. The second one is to increase minimum staffing to 8. Now, this is the career staffing. Currently, it is 6. So currently, the way the career staff is deployed is if there has to be at least 6 personnel on duty. So it would be a 2-person crew out of Station 2 and then 2 2-person crews out of Station 1. What we're recommending in the short term is to move to a minimum staffing of 8. What that would allow for is a minimum staffing of 3 at Station 2, and then 1 3-person crew at Station 1, and 1 2-person crew at Station 1. The next one is to adapt staffing technologies for volunteers. Now, in the report, we lay out a bunch of different options, but the purpose of this is to have an ability for the career battalion chief, who was the on-duty shift officer for that day, to understand what volunteers are available so they can be utilized. So if they know, hey, at this volunteer house there are 6 members that are in town and they are ready to respond if there is an emergency, they can be called right away instead of waiting and then they get there after the emergency is already mitigated by the career staff. Fourth one is we look at EMS reimbursement. So currently there's a third party that is used for EMS transport. One of the that we heard is that sometimes staffing is short, and this is a nationwide issue. There's a shortage of EMTs and paramedics. So sometimes personnel from the Butte-Silver department, they have to backfill and help provide staffing for these units. So if a call comes out, maybe only a driver was available for that EMS unit, then one of the firefighters has to get on that EMS unit to complete the transport. What this does is this then decreases that minimum staffing, which is 6, down to 5. So that then puts the staff at a, then puts the public at a risk. Next one is establish a safety committee. This is just a general view of, hey, volunteer and career members should get together on a monthly basis to discuss any safety issues to improve the safety of responders. I skipped one. The one before that was to develop a strategic plan and annual report. A strategic plan is basically going to help you get through this master plan. This master plan lays out from 1 year to 15 years. A strategic plan is going to allow you to break down these goals in 3 to 5 year blocks and basically set these goals in 3 to 5 years, and then use annual reports to see how did we meet these goals, what did we achieve throughout that year, what do we need to move forward from there. Throughout our site visits, we had heard different, and talking to stakeholders, was what is the actual role of the Director of Fire Services? So we made that role needs to be clearly defined. The Director of Fire Services, we heard from volunteer leadership, is the chief of the career side, but they also oversee the volunteer personnel. And then we heard, no, they don't. So basically, that role needs to be clearly defined. Who is at the top, who oversees, because we need to have a chain of command when decisions are made, who is ultimately in charge of that. Next one is defining a county-wide millage rate. So what this basically is, this is a tax rate on fire services. So what we recommend currently in the county, there's 2 rates. There's an emergency services rate, and then there is a fire services rate. Only those in the urban area pay both. So those in the urban area pay a higher rate that goes to the fire services. We recommend that there should be one county-wide rate because the whole county-wide should be receiving the same services. So these additional funds would help with improvements to volunteer stations, career stations, personnel, apparatus. Next one would be add one FTE, so one full-time employee to the fire inspection staff. Currently, there's just the assistant chief that serves as the fire marshal. Their workload, one of the things that we looked at is how many inspections are they doing yearly, annually, and their workload is well exceeding what is recommended by one inspector. Next one, it would be utilizing the national certs. So we want to be able to have the fire service has a lot of national certs, whether it's IFSAC, Pro Board. Now ESCI, we're not recommending one specific one. Basically use these national standards and certs to ensure that all personnel meet the qualifications for a firefighter, for a fire officer, for a chief. That way when you get on the scene of a emergency, that incident commander, person making the choices, doesn't have to think, oh, well, this person is a firefighter, but they only have this training and they're only able to do this. So being able to train everybody to this national standard where if the firefighter's on scene, whether it's career or volunteer, we know that they're able to perform the same responsibilities. The next thing is looking at the current. So the current response plan a lot of times depletes the entire career staff without utilizing some of the volunteers. And this kind of plays back into, hey, if the career personnel knew what volunteer assets were available, they could be utilized. And currently also, only the career personnel can respond to medical emergencies. So one of the things that we recommend is taking a look at this, and is there a way that the volunteer personnel can respond to this? Obviously, they would need the training for this, but when we went around and we talked to the volunteer members, there are a lot of volunteer members that do have that medical certifications to be able to respond to those. And from there, we want to take a look at improving the recruitment and retention of the volunteers. Going around to the volunteer stations, we've talked to a lot of them are facing issues on being able to recruit volunteers. And this isn't just a problem in Butte. This is a problem nationwide. Nationwide, we're seeing trouble to be able to recruit volunteers. So we want to take a look at different ways that we can improve. One of the things that has worked nationwide is a lot of stations are putting in work areas. So they'll be able to recruit people that work a remote job, that want to be a volunteer, that can be at the station. They can come up to the station, bring their computer, work from there, and then be also available to respond to emergency incidents. And we found that this nationwide has, those departments that have done this nationwide have been able to recruit additional volunteers doing this. All right, one recommendation 1M, this one is, I want to highlight on the keyword consider consolidation of volunteer resources. When you look at the amount of stations and the close proximity to some volunteer stations to each other and the needs that they need for rehabbing those, can we take a look and say, okay, instead of rehabbing two stations that are very close to one another, can we consolidate and build one station in the middle that has all of those modern days amenities that are going to help with recruiting and retaining the volunteers? And also with that, a lot of departments that have done this nationwide, a lot of the issues are the identities of the departments. With this, it could be accomplished where that station gets built, and then you could have apparatus that still has the patch or insignia of that volunteer department that it originally was from. And with that, we want to rebrand the department as Butte-Silver Fire Department. Going around, you know, yes, we have the volunteer organizations have their identity as their volunteer organizations, and then even the career side, their uniforms will just say Butte on it. We want to create that where we're working as one, where truly the department is the Butte-Silver Fire Department. So we're going to, one of the things we recommend is to rebrand as that. The next one kind of plays into those recruitment and retention issues for the volunteers. It's creating a live-in program. And what this has done with departments that have a college nearby, this has worked really, really well. And with you guys having one nearby, it basically has set the station up to allow to have dormitories. So what this means is students are able to join, get trained, and they can live at the fire station without paying room or board in exchange for providing so many hours of duty per week or per night. And again, this is something nationwide that volunteer departments that have a university nearby have used, and it's just presented as an option. Obviously, it would require renovating the stations for that space. A lot of the things that I just talked about cost money. So the next one that we want to look at is pursuing the grant opportunities that are out there. So within the report, we present some common fire service grants that we suggest that the fire department look at to help pay for some of these. Call processing issues. This one, we noticed when the data that we received, a lot of the issues were we couldn't extrapolate when the call was received, when it wasn't. Now this problem has since been fixed because a new reporting software was instituted after we did our report, but we still included that here. The next one is legal interpretation. So during our whole report and during our site visits, we were presented multiple different documents, and we were asked to interpret that. Well, part of wasn't in our scope, and we're not legal experts. So we recommend that the department and that look at, hey, what actually defines, you know, this opinion letter here, or the charter, or the state law, or where the state law might conflict the county code. So that is something that we recommend that is done at a legal level there. The last one is pagers for volunteers. So volunteers get alerted through calls by the pagers. Now, yes, there's many different applications out there for smartphones and everything, but what does that rely on? That relies on cell service. And in the short times that we have been here, we know that cell service isn't always available in all the areas. So pagers was something that we heard from the volunteer departments, is that their members don't have pagers to be able to respond to calls. Well, we recommend looking and saying, okay, can we provide pagers to the volunteer organizations where maybe there's a bank of pagers at each volunteer house, and when you're available, if you're going to be available the next few days, you come up, you pick up a pager, and then you have it. If you know that you're going out of town, or you have something where you're not going to be available the whole weekend, you can take the pager back, and another member who would be available would be able to use that. So that finishes up the short term. The next, we're going to look at midterm. So mid-range, midterm is what we're saying is should be accomplished in a 3 to 7 year. The first one would be adding an assistant chief of administration. This is actually in the charter. And then what the main responsibilities of this assistant chief of administration would be to be the training officer of the department. We further recommend adding a second FTE. So we added one in the short term. We're going to recommend to add a second FTE to the fire inspection staff midterm. Again, when we looked at that workload exceeds what one FTE should be doing. It even exceeds what 2 FTEs will be doing. But we spaced it out. Instead of saying add 2 right out to short term, we're adding 1 short term and 1 midterm. The next one would be increasing that minimum staffing to 9. So if you remember short term, we recommended it increase to 8. Now we're recommending it go to 9. What this would do, this would allow 1 3-person crew at Station 2, and then 2 3-person crews out of Station 1. 2D takes a look at the EMS staffing solutions. So we're taking a look and saying, okay, if there continues to be issues with staffing of EMT and paramedics, with knowing that, yes, the fire department responds to fire calls, but nationwide and even within Butte, the predominantly of the calls are EMS. So how can we make sure that we're prepared to respond to EMS? So one would be personnel sharing, so responding or sharing our personnel with those third-party provider to make sure that we're staffed. Next would be, does Butte-Silver Fire Department purchase a transport unit and staff that for there? And then the other would be, okay, if one third-party provider isn't able to fulfill, maybe we take a look at adding a second or a third. 2E looks at mutual aid agreements. So Butte-Silver is one of the only career departments in the immediate area. So surrounding jurisdictions, sometimes that are volunteer only, that don't have staffing maybe during the day because volunteers have a job, they maybe get pulled to different areas and are utilized more by other surrounding areas than what they should. So just taking a look and making sure that the department isn't overextending and is being pulled away from Butte more than. The next one is going to be 2F, which is capital improvement plans. So this takes a look at making sure that we have the funding set aside for the station repairs that we need, for the stations that we need to build, for the apparatus that we need to replace. Next one is succession planning and mentorship program. So just working together, making sure that we're constantly improving our members so that we have personnel to replace the future or become those future leaders of the department. 2H is a volunteer coordinator position. So what this position is just a position that would help assist the volunteers with recruitment, retention. A lot of departments nationwide have made that a civilian spot where that person's sole job is to go out and to help with recruitment and retention of the volunteers. I think it got cut off. And then 2I is apparatus. So taking a look at what apparatus that is truly needed and can we consolidate to save a cost there. During our report, we were asked about an additional career station. Currently, when we look at the growth, and we did not see a need for a spot for a third career station, but what we do recommend possibly moving forward might be to co-locate career members and volunteer members in a station. So instead of building a new station, if we realize we need staffing, career staffing, at some part in the response area, instead of building a career station there, if we have a volunteer station nearby, maybe we can co-locate those. And then last is long-term. So long-term is what we're saying to complete in the 7 to 15 years. So in that, we're increasing that minimum staffing to 10. So with that, we've remained the 1 3-person crew at Station 2, the 2 3-person crews at Station 1, but we're adding a battalion chief. So that battalion chief, we're not adding the position of the battalion chief, we're adding that battalion chief on their sole response vehicle. So what that does is that adds to have a dedicated incident commander on all emergencies. Next takes a look at putting together a community paramedicine program, and this can be done with private-public partnerships, but what this does is this goes out and it tries to prevent those emergencies before they actually occur. And a lot of departments have been able to reduce their EMS call volume by saying, hey, we know that this person calls 911 every Tuesday because they need a ride to the hospital. Well, can we take a look at that and let's say maybe we can pair them with the resources that they need so it prevents them from actually calling 911 and reduces the stress on the 911 system. 3C is to utilize the National Fire Academy, which is currently on hold right now, but to utilize that as professional development for both company officers, chief officers, both career and volunteer. And then the last one adds ranks to the organization. It suggests adding a driver position, whether it is technician, engineer, whatever different departments call it, different things, and also adds the position of a lieutenant. What this does is this helps even out the rank structure and also provides a more solid succession plan. It also helps retention of the career personnel because there's more promotional opportunities. And with that, that concludes the report, so we're ready for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Are there any questions of commissioners? Commissioner O'Leary. I don't know. Sometimes they don't come on. See if it.
Okay, we'll just use this one. You didn't talk much about response time. I'm not sure if that was part of your scope, but I represent a rural district, and obviously we have a lot of volunteer departments in our district. But did you find any part of Butte-Silver Bow that had inadequate response time? I'm thinking Roosevelt Drive, Melrose, areas that are probably 20 to 25 minutes away from our paid stations.
Commissioner O'Leary, Mr. Hogan.
I would need to look at that. I know we didn't see any major response time with that, and that's probably because there's not a lot of responses there. So when we take a look at the system as a whole, it's looking at the overall response times. But we do break down in the one section the response times, and we have a heat map in there that identifies that, but there were not any clear issues, mostly because of the lack of incidents in those areas.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Is there any other questions of commissioners? I'll follow up Commissioner O'Leary and then Commissioner Morgan.
You mentioned the adapting staffing technology for volunteers. Is there technology currently available? I am imagining like this is sort of like a check-in program for them. Is there technology already available, for mobile phones or something that would allow them to do that? And what would that look like?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Leary, Mr. Hogan.
Yes, there are a lot out there. We name a few in the report, but we're not going to recommend one vendor over the other. But basically what that looks like, a lot of times it's just a mobile app. And if you're available, you hit that you're available, and then the person on the other end, so in this case, the battalion chief most likely would then have a list and saying, okay, we know that racetrack has 4 members that are available to respond. We know that Big Butte has 3 members that are available to respond. So when an incident comes out and they need additional resources, either right off the bat they can call for these units, but they know generally, okay, we know that this many people are available to respond. And that also will help them know to make the decision, okay, if there isn't a major incident, we know we have 10 volunteer members that are there, versus if we only have 2 or 3, then we might need to get our off-duty shifts. Hey, if we have some sort of major incident, we're going to have to call you back because of we're only showing 2 members available.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I want to explore the EMS fee reimbursement portion. Have you ran across any other communities that have that same type of setup where you have a third party that runs medical, where the career department would then kind of switch gears and go to work for the EMS side? I'm just wondering if you've seen that, and then 2, what that billing structure looks like, because I'm sure that the emergency EMS side is billing for their time at some point to an insurance company. How would that work?
Commissioner Morgan, Mr. Hogan.
Yes, so different departments have this, and each one is different depending on how it's going to look. So basically, what most departments are doing is they're saying, okay, if our personnel are out for more than an hour on because we had to backfill the transport units because we had an ALS, and there was an ALS call, and you only responded with a BLS unit. So then that for the, ALS is just a higher level of care. BLS is a lower level. So if that, so a certain amount that they bill and get back from the insurance, that goes directly to the third party. Well, if the fire department helped provide staffing for that transport, a percentage of that amount that was billed and goes to the third party actually goes back to the fire department. Now, sometimes it goes to the general fund. Sometimes it goes directly to the fire department to augment overtime or apparatus. But basically, there's so many different unique spots that you could look at and figure out, okay, if our personnel are being utilized by the third party, how can we receive some of that funding that they get billed through the insurance?
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Follow-up, Commissioner Morgan.
One other follow-up in regards to ISO ratings. That a topic has been, brought up a few times. From the suggestions that you guys made, do you compare that to see how that would affect ISO ratings, either positive or negatively?
Commissioner Morgan, Mr. Hogan.
Yes. So with the increased staffing, looking at the response times and apparatus, all that goes into the playing into your ISO score. Now, with the ISO score, a lot of cities and a lot of insurance companies no longer use ISCO to determine the rate. So it's kind of gone by. Do you have any add on that?
I think you got it.
Okay. Commissioner Callahan.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. You made the comment that you recommend a county-wide fee, but then you just spoke and said that some areas might do 5 calls a year. Another area might do 100 calls in a week. Why would you recommend the same fee for all areas?
Commissioner Callahan, Mr. Hogan.
Good question. So with that, it's the same thing as when you look at, yes, the amount of calls that they actually respond there, but it's basically the insurance that you have. So if you live in one area and you live in another area within the county, then your insurance is probably very similar. That's the same thing with the fire service. You're looking at the fire service as an insurance policy that's there to be needed. So yes, your area might not get a lot of calls, but you want to be able to have a fully staffed department when you do need them.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. Thank you guys for the presentation. This might be a question for the rest of us, but obviously increased staffing, short-term, long-term, midterm, that's going to cost money, just as they mentioned that all of this is going to cost money. So I guess maybe a question to Chief Executive Gallagher is, you know, are there things within this plan that, or maybe Director Osborne could answer, that we wish to implement first? I mean, in my mind, if we're going to go short-term and one person is to add staffing, do we have the budget authority to cover something like that? That'd be my first question. So you can answer it. You can answer it.
Commissioner Thatcher, I can answer that a little bit. So some of the short-term goals that we're going, one of them is when we talk about the fire district. We're looking at that currently. One of the things that we're looking to do, and we put into the state, is a recommendation to expand the fire district, which would include the Montana Connections Park, which because it was in the TIF district and they had the TIF fire fund that was used to fund multiple different kind of programs, apparatus, things like that. But once the TIF sunsetted, they weren't embedded into the fire district. So we sent in currently a recommendation, and we will be bringing a resolution to this body to expand that fire district. To expand the rest of the fire district in Butte-Silver Bow, we thought that there would be much more needed community outreach. This was something that we knew that we probably needed immediately, because that's a highly manufactured area that needs that fire protection. So in that could expand some potential funding. Now we haven't got there yet, but that's kind of the first step. There's a lot of things on there that are going to cost significant amounts of money, and so for one, we got to have that money to be able to do that. So within this plan, and I think that as they look at the comprehensive plan of this whole thing, and then strategically be able to look at things that we can define, that we can move to some of those goals, and I think those are the things that we need to do. And so, Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. That's kind of what I was thinking, is maybe the expansion of the district. But then could you explain for the record, I guess, you said it would involve public comment. That's not something that goes out to the voters. That's just something that we say, hey, we're expanding.
Commissioner Thatcher, so part of the state law, when you expand a fire district, the governing body, we'd have to have a public hearing, but the governing body, through 2/3 vote, can expand a fire district. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Just one follow-up question. You mentioned it a little bit, that there was some, some overlap of fire districts by location. Way back when I was involved in fire service, we went through and did an apparatus count for the community. How does Butte-Silver Bow compare to other municipalities or governments with the amount of apparatus that we have securing our city? Did you guys look at that?
Commissioner Morgan.
I could take this one.
Okay.
Chief Executive Gallagher Commission. So I'm the Assistant Fire Chief in Helena. So it's an hour away. We have 34,256 people, very similar to you, and we have 3 engines, a ladder, 2 rescues, 2 wildlands, and a tech rescue truck, as well as a hazmat truck and trailer to serve that populace, which is 16 square miles. So obviously smaller, but significant. We have less apparatus than Lewis and Clark County, if that answers your question.
Yeah, so comparably to Silver Bow, I think he's asking, how much apparatus we have, and
significant, much more than most communities this size.
Thank you. Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. Director Osborne, just really quick. So one of the recommendations was to add Assistant Fire Chief of Administration. Am I correct in thinking that Kelly Lee is an Assistant Fire Chief? Is that correct? Yes. So it would be somebody on top of or as well as Kelly Lee. There'd be two of them. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Commissioner Thatcher. I think we got. Any other questions of commissioners? Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. Thank you both for being here. Interesting presentation and everything. I was wondering about something else, and then what you just mentioned about apparatuses. I was thinking about that and how it goes into what I was. But we do an awful lot of mutual aid work. It seems like where we're sending some apparatuses and personnel out of state and elsewhere for bigger fires like what we saw in California this past winter. Did you do any looking into that and how that affects our personnel rates and equipment and downtime and cost sharing for those instances?
Commissioner Anderson, Mr. Hogan.
Yes, we did. So even still with looking at sending those pieces of apparatus and those personnel out of state, there is still, unless you were to send them all, but normally it's just 2 or 3 that may be sent out, there is still enough reserve apparatus to backfill and plus more to have that available.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Follow-up, Commissioner Anderson.
It almost seems in that sense that I don't know, but it seems like almost at that point we may have a surplus of what we can fully use and utilize as a community. And is that a problem with the depreciation of the apparatuses and the equipment and everything? And then another question along with that, with the personnel, when we're sending the personnel, how would increasing the staffing, it looks like with the different positions in 3 to 7 years, you're recommending almost an additional 5, possibly 6 full-time employees. How is that going to impact? Are we going to hire more people? Are we going to be able to schedule those extra people with the people we have hired now? How does this look a few years into the future with the current personnel if we do increase the staffing levels to the recommended?
Commissioner Anderson, Mr. Hogan.
Yes, so with the increase of the minimum staffing, and within the report, we recommend the minimum staffing be increased. So what that means is, right now the minimum staffing is 6. Well, there may be, 9 people assigned to the shift, but we have to account for vacations, vacancies, and all of that. On the career side, all of that is taken into account before those personnel would be available to be deployed out of state. So we're looking at people's vacation calendars, we're looking at injuries, and we're always making sure, do we have enough personnel within to cover the area here before we send people elsewhere. So as we increase the minimum staffing, as we go from that 6 to 8, instead of needing 9 personnel with vacations, training, and all that, we may need 12 personnel per shift. Basically, you're going to look at your relief factor, which takes a look and say, all right, how much vacation time's been used per year, how much sick time, and then also when those some of the personnel that get deployed out of state are volunteer. So we need to make a look and say, all right, and that comes with the communication part. Hey, we're sending 3 of our most active volunteer members that are going to be out of state. So then that helps the fire department make decisions on, okay, we know that these members are not going to be available when they're normally always available, every night, every weekend because they're out of state. So yes, as you increase The minimum staffing, you're going to need to hire additional personnel to be able to meet that.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Any other questions of commissioners? Not sure. Any other questions? Oh, Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you. Sorry to beat this horse. So you had, in the short term, one of the recommendations was to help kind of mend the relationship between the two, or the volunteer and the career fire departments. You had recommended training, but are there any other sort of ideas that you guys, through your conversations with everybody throughout this process, are there any other tools that, you know, could be utilized to help that situation?
Commissioner Thatcher, Mr. Hogan.
I would say the conflict and just all parties approaching everything with a open mind and being open to change, because we know the way we did things, 20 years ago, even 5 years ago, needs to change. Things change, personnel change, the way we respond to things. So I would say, yes, by training, but also everybody just keeping a open mind and maybe training your mind to rethink how you always thought to move forward. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, the fire department, our job is to provide the best service to the public, and we need to put our own personal agendas aside to ultimately move forward to change, to make sure that we're truly operating and that we're separating, personally what we want, and we're doing what's best for the community and the taxpayers.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Any other questions of commissioners? Seeing none, well, thank you, gentlemen, for being here today.
Thank you.
So moving on to section 2, consent agenda, A 1 through 4 and B 1 through 26, with the addition of our 3 other emergency suspension additions today. Do we have any friendly amendments and or segregations? Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I would like to segregate number 21, 25, 156.
That's item number 21, communication number 2025-156. Do we have any other friendly? Commissioner O'Leary.
Yes, I'd like to segregate communication number 6, 2025-141.
That's item number 6, communication number 2025-141. Do we have any other friendly amendments and or segregations? Seeing none, Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. At this time, I'll make a motion that we approve Section 2, the consent agenda, A, the committee reports 1 through 4, B, communications 1 through 26, with the exclusion of number 6, 25-141, and number 21, 25-156.
We have a motion and a second to approve tonight's consent agenda. Is there anything on the question? Vote. And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
11 yea, 0 nay.
11 yea, 0 nay. Motion passes. Moving on to item number 6, communication number 2025-141, Julia Crane, Butte-Silver Planning Director, requesting Council of Commissioners authorization to approve a council communication number 2025-100, a request from John Jeffrey to purchase Butte-Silver owned property called the Spoler Edition, which consists of 1.67 acres. Commissioner O'Leary.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. I just want to start by saying that I appreciate that there are developers out there that are still interested in further developing our community and building more housing. And thank you, Mr. Jeffrey. I don't know if you're here in the audience tonight, but thank you, Mr. Jeffrey, for making an effort to push this particular property into our sphere. I think we can all agree that Butte needs to stay out in front of the housing demand and, make sure that we don't end up in a full-blown crisis like we've seen other communities in our state do. That said, I think we need to be strategic with the land that the county controls to make sure it's put to the highest and best use. And the parcel in question here is a 1.67 acre lot. It's on the north end of Wathena Drive, right on the border of District 5, which is my district, and District 9, which is Mr. Mankin's. And it's surrounded by a loop, a spur of Mammoth Drive. It's currently zoned R1. It has sewer that crosses the lot. It's got a fire hydrant on the west side. There's water infrastructure, gas infrastructure, and power infrastructure all really close. In other words, it is a highly developable lot. It's a really good piece of land. My primary concern with how things have played out so far is twofold. First, the suggested sales price of this piece of land is $40,000, and if it was on the open market, I am sure that it would sell for probably 3 times that. I was digging into some recent sales data today, and I found a parcel of land that's less than a stone's throw away, nearly identical in size and similar infrastructure, and it was about 3 times the price of this one. So I think that, you know, my understanding is that if we sell this parcel of land, that money will go back into the Parks Department, which I think we can all agree is an underfunded department, and it would be negligent of us to take that money and just leave it on the table, you know, money that could benefit our local parks. Second, it seems prudent to me that properties like this one that are so readily developable that they go through a developer's package process. Right now we're I guess talking about one developer, but you know, we need to look at these pieces of land and say, what is the highest and best use? What does the community actually need? I personally would like to see more affordable housing, you know, something that's more entry level to allow people to get on the housing ladder. I'm sure we're all aware of how difficult it can be in these last 5 years. So I'd love to have more discussion, but I'll make a motion to refer this communication, number 2025-14, to community development to go through a full developers package process and then report back to the council with recommendations.
We have a motion and a second to refer this communication number 2025-141 back to the Community Development Department to do a full developers package. Is there anything on the question? Commissioner Mankins first.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. Thank you, Commissioner O'Leary, can we just pump the brakes just a second? It seemed like we had just a few comments, and then I'm just going to ask a few questions of Director Crane here a second. So we had some public comment here that I think there's a few of them still in, and Ms. Patrick is still here. And just wanting to know why now. I know that we need housing. This is something that's out there, but it was considered a green space. If we could just get some clarity on how it became from just a green space and now to a developer's package, or to be possibly sold to Jeffries. Could we just get some clarity on that part first? I have a couple of questions here, but that one first.
So the question to Director Crane?
Yes, please.
Okay. Commissioner Mankins, Director Crane.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Mankins, this particular property, which is located on Mammoth Drive, was a park that was created through what was then the subdivision law in 1979, and so it was, as required under Montana state law, we are required to set aside certain parkland for major subdivisions, of which the Spiller Addition is one, and that is how the Mammoth Park was created. In 2023, as part of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, a number of parks in the community, really undeveloped parks, so green spaces without your traditional park-like improvements, were named to a surplus property list. Under the current ordinances in the city and county of Butte-Silver Bow, Title 2. 36065 is related to the sale and lease or exchange of dedicated parkland. And a requirement for the sale of that property is for it to be declared surplus parkland in a master plan. So that is where that determination was made in 2023. That plan was adopted by the Council of Commissioners and is an attachment to the 2021 comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Director Crane. Follow-up, Commissioner Mankins.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. Director Crane, so where is the list of surplus land or green space that the public or any of us could view to see if we would like to purchase one of those?
Commissioner Mankins, Director Crane.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Mankins, the surplus parkland list is included in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, which can be found on the Parks Recreation Master Plan website here at Butte-Silver Bow. And it is actually listed on Figure 5 of that document, which outlines Butte Park's surplus property.
Thank you, Director Crane. Follow-up, Commissioner Mankins.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. So moving with this, so throughout, I know that one of my constituents that live in that area adjacent to it, that his parents spoke tonight, has asked through the last several years, at least one time that I know of, that he wanted to purchase this land. Is there any record of that, or is there something that can clarify where that discussion started or ended?
Commissioner Mankins, Director Crane.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Mankins, I have not had a personal conversation with that constituent. I do have colleagues in other departments of Butte-Silver Bow who have spoken directly with that constituent about their interest to purchase this particular location. At the time the request was made, and it was made informally, it was not made in writing, it was an inquiry verbally to purchase the property. They were asked what their intention was, and it was to essentially leave it as open space. Knowing that the community comprehensive plan and the attachment, particularly the housing strategic plan, has outlined that housing is a required need in our community, we felt that the proposal to keep it as open space was not in keeping with the community goals that are outlined in that plan, which is to create housing. And so it was, we did not tell him no, but we did not encourage him to, or we would not support that development proposal because it was not keeping with the community goals.
Thank you, Director Crane. Commissioner Mankins.
Thank you, Chief Executive, and thank you, Director Crane. So with the people that showed up tonight and are concerned about the area and the green area or the green space, what is the suggestion for them? That they invested in that area? They thought it was going to be a park for several years now. It was never really developed. But they're still in hopes because there are kids there, there are grandkids there, just people possibly moving into new houses there that bring homes. That's one of the concerns or one of the questions. And then the other question is that the accessibility, have we looked at that feasibility, the accessibility coming in one way, going out the same exact way, that there's only one way in, one way out, seeing that we've had something, we had such a large turnout for our fire department that, if something did happen, is there concern that way with, building those houses and having those houses up there, that could be a danger to the citizens in that area?
Commissioner Mankins, Director Crane.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Mankins. If a development were to occur on the location that is being discussed this evening, it would be required to go through the subdivision process. And the subdivision process is performed under statute, the state of Montana. In that, we have to evaluate sufficiency of the proposal. If more than 5 units of housing were to be created, we require 2 forms of access and egress. That is to provide for the people or the number of people living in a neighborhood to have the opportunity to gain access to the collector street and then the arterial to get out if they needed to. We do not pre-qualify properties. We analyze that when a proposal is brought forward. Typically, a developer will put together a proposal that will show how they are meeting the conditions or the requirements of the subdivision process, and then we evaluate those and then continue to work through them until we can bring that preliminary plat before the planning board for their recommendation to this body to then approve it.
Thank you. Director Crane.
Thank you.
Follow up.
Yeah,
Commissioner
thank you.
Mencken.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher and Director Crane. So you said if there were 4 to 5, or is that 4.5 houses that you needed to, or just for the public and for everyone? So is their proposal 2 houses, 3 houses, less than 4 houses, so it would only need the 1 access?
Commissioner Menkins, Director Crane.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Menkins, I am not speaking directly about this proposal specifically. I do not have any specific information related to the development plan for what is known as Mammoth Park. I have been told through the communication that Mr. Jeffrey submitted to the council that it would be identified for residential development or subdivision. What I am speaking to are the categorizations of subdivision in Silver Bow County. Minor subdivisions, which is 5 or less lots, do not require parkland commitment. They do not require 2 forms of egress. However, if you have 6 or more lots being created, we require 2 forms of egress to enter and exit that subdivision. I brought up the parkland commitment because if that area was to be subdivided, there would be a requirement for parkland to be provided to the community. We have customarily in recent years opted to do parks or cash in lieu as opposed to creating park space, particularly because we have so much acreage in our community that has already been identified as surplus property or surplus parkland. And so the cash in lieu allows those funds to be pooled in the Parks and Recreation budget to assist with the maintenance of our park system.
Thank you, Director Crane. Follow up, Commissioner Menkins, and then we'll go to Commissioner Thatcher. Okay, and then to Commissioner Anderson.
So Chief Executive Gallagher, thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher and Director Crane. So again, back to the public. So we all hear that we want or that we need, but what the public is asking and the constituents in that neighborhood are asking that it's not to be there. So for me to ask, and I probably have to ask Attorney Enruth, you know, in lieu of everything and with the constituents that have come up and asked to not have this and to keep it as green space, is there something in lieu that I can make a motion to deny the communication and keep it as is, open space, green?
Commissioner Menkins, County Attorney Enruth.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Menkins, if you look at section 3.28.020, the disposal of leases of city county property, the ordinance had been updated, so you have to click on the hyperlink to get this. It says that the commissioners may do so by auction, exchange, direct sale by 2/3 votes of its members. So the answer to your question is the final say is with the commissioners. You may vote against the resolution.
Thank you, County Attorney Enruth.
So then I make a substitute, Chief Executive Gallagher.
Commissioner Menkins.
So I make a substitute motion that we deny communication number 2025-144 and keep as is as green space.
141.
Or 141.
Second. Place on file.
Place on file.
Okay, so the motion is to deny communication number 2025-141 and keep as green space and place on file. And we've been seconded by Commissioner Anderson. Is there anything on the question? Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. Director Crane, could you just talk about the reason why it would be purchased at $40,000 and why it isn't higher than that, maybe? Thank you.
Commissioner Thatcher, Director Crane.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Thatcher. The Land Sales Committee received the referral from the Council of Commissioners to discuss and then make a recommendation back to this body about the potential sale of this particular property. As is customary with our land sales, we utilize the Montana Department of Revenue assessed value. And for this particular parcel, the assessed value is $40,242. I have the, it's in this stack. But that is the price that was moved at the meeting, at the Land Sales Committee meeting, and was used when drafting the proposal. However, as you know, within, or I can let you know that within the land sales ordinance, chapter 3.2810, you have that as a baseline. That is not the required sale price. It is just what we have used to make the motion to the council.
Thank you, Director Crane. Commissioner Callahan.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. Ms. Crane, my question is, the developer that developed this property 45 whatever years ago was required to put space aside for a park.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that they put space aside for a park and they're not required to develop it as a park for those folks to use?
Commissioner Callahan, I could help you on this. There was a lot of times, and being the parks director saw this, so when development comes, they're required to set aside a certain amount of space that could be park. And so when they do that, a lot of times, and I'm not saying this particular property, you end up with some of the most unusable space given to the county or city county for that land. And that's how we ended up with a lot of properties. If you look at the parks master plan and what it looks at, Butte-Silver Bow has more park space than probably any community of its size anywhere. So the master plan addressed if there's a need for more park space. We do have park land that's been undeveloped, but there's not a need to develop more of that park land. And so underneath the parks master plan, it identified those parcels that could be potentially developed into it. If you see some of the developments that have happened recently, the one that's down by the YMCA, instead of a park land that we required them, they put in a trail that may help with the trail connectivity that goes to Copper Mountain. And so there can be either payment in lieu of, or we can ask them to do other alternatives that go along with that. But to answer your question, a lot of land was given that never got developed, and really there wasn't a need for developing more parks. Follow Commissioner Callahan.
Thank you, Chief. I guess my question is, if they're required by law for a park, why are we able to turn around and sell it and make a profit off it?
Commissioner Callahan, Director Crane. I think it's on.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Callahan. There is nothing in the statute, the subdivision statute, that says that must remain a park forever. And that is why we have the parks land sale process available to us. And I can't speculate about why the developer of this particular subdivision did not invest in a park in that location. I know that we have several of them. A lot of the surplus parkland that we have currently is tied to a lot of subdivision that has occurred in our community, but I could not speculate on the reasons why.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Crane. I'll go Commissioner Thatcher, and then I'll go to Commissioner Healy.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. Director Crane, how I'm understanding this is Mr. Jeffrey, who has submitted this communication, is already in the process of a development in the area. Is that correct?
Commissioner Thatcher, Director Crane.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Thatcher, that is correct. We have had preliminary meetings related to residential development in the area.
Okay, one follow-up. Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. So then, at that point, he would have most of the property. So would all of this be mushed together, or are these then two separate deals? And if they are not separate, we aren't required to accept a payment in lieu. Like, we could still approve this. He could have this parcel of land, whether it be it developed on or not, as long as it stays in with the subdivision part of everything. Is that correct? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do understand what you're
Commissioner
saying.
Thatcher, Director Crane.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Thatcher, that is not accurate. This would be a separate subdivision from the development that is taking place.
Thank you, Director Crane. Commissioner Healy.
So my question is this, then, if, like one of the citizens mentioned, if they buy the lot, then that would prevent it from going up again? I mean, if we vote no and then they are allowed to buy the lot as an individual or as a group to keep this from happening again to them?
Commissioner Healy, Director Crane.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Healy. So this is a bit of a more complex answer to that question. So there's a lot of options that are here now. Currently, what you have before you is a request by a member of the public to purchase surplus parkland. That request comes to you with a intent to develop housing in that location. There has been discussion this evening that you may want to select a developer's packet as a proposal for this property. By doing so, you are stating that your intent or you as the commissioners believe that the best or highest and best use of that property is development, not parkland, but development. And so you have options under your sale of city and county property ordinance to either auction that land, exchange that land, or direct sale by 2/3 vote of this body. Or an alternative under another ordinance, which is community development of government-owned property, is to issue a developer's packet. So you have alternatives in front of you that would be, the solution would be through how you choose to pursue these ordinances. It's an option.
Thank you, Director Crane. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I thought many years ago on this body, there was a few of you with me, that we would never be dealing with surplus parkland from the 70s again, but la-ti-da, here it comes again. I definitely don't have an issue with denying this communication and placing it on file, but here's the issue that I would see going forward. One, we obviously have at least two parties that are interested in parkland property, be it the residents, be it a developer, be it somebody. And we need to face the fiddle here that the Parks and Rec Department is never going to make this a park because of funding, I would say. Now, I should never say never, because just like when you buy your house, you can never say that your view is ever going to be obstructed, because we all know, me as a commissioner of District 3, understand that wholeheartedly with subdivisions coming in. And so the only way to protect your view in theory is to purchase the land. And so on this particular thing, if we go through and we deny this communication, there is nothing that says that one of the residents of the district next week could petition us for the exact same thing. And then what do we do with that? We would refer it to land sales, just like we did in this process. They would come back to this body, and then we would obviously have a vote as well. And so what I would envision is, on this process, it would go out, like Commissioner O'Leary stated, to a developer's packet, would give the opportunity for the public, developers, property owners to take a look at it and submit a packet. and then they would come back to this body with their recommendation, but nothing in that recommendation would say that we would have to accept it. We could still deny that communication, but we know what the true intent or the true feeling of that parkland would be at that point, rather than, again, next week, another person comes up wanting to buy it. So that would be my thought on actually seeing what the developer's packet come back with, and we'd still have the vote like County Attorney Enruth said.
Thank you, Commissioner Morgan. Commissioner Anderson, and then.
Sure. Thank you very much, Chief Executive. I have a couple very big issues with this. The first one being is that we have an adjacent property ownership thing. We had the adjacent property owner come up and ask, it sounds like numerous times, to purchase this, and he was just kind of given the cold shoulder because people didn't like his proposal of keeping it green space. At that point in time, it seems like what everybody in that area would have liked to have. So the first question, I guess, is who asked for this property first? Was it Mr. Jeffers to develop it, or was it the other person, the adjacent landowner, who asked about purchasing it and keeping it as green space because that's what he and his neighbors would prefer and what it already is?
Commissioner Anderson, Director Crane. Sorry.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Anderson. I believe that the request was made by one of the adjacent owners in July of 2024. The other entity is adjacent as well, I believe, in the same neighborhood. I don't know if they are, no one is directly adjacent because this is completely surrounded by street. It is, so there is, you know, many adjacent landowners under that definition. However, we did not receive that person's request in writing.
Thank you, Director Crane. Follow-up, Commissioner Anderson.
Normally, if somebody comes up and has a question for me and wants to know something, I'll share with them the proper avenue and way to do that. Why was this courtesy not extended to the people who asked to buy it?
Commissioner Anderson, I would like to have former land records manager answer that question for you.
Thanks, Chief Executive, Commissioner Anderson, members of council. For the record, David Gary. I was the land records coordinator when the person in question come in and requested to buy. It wasn't a request, it was an inquiry to buy this. And I did. I explained to him the exact process that we go through before he ever submits a communication to council. And by that, I mean I check with the three primary departments involved in this and see if they had any red flags in selling this property. And the red flag that came back was, no, we wouldn't support this because we don't think preventing development is the right approach for the city and doesn't comply with our comprehensive plan. He was told that. He was told that it didn't matter, that we're not saying that you cannot apply. What we're saying is that you will at least be objected to by a couple of departments within the department, but you're more than welcome to submit a communication to council.
Thank you.
So he was well aware of the process and that he could continue forward.
Thank you, Mr. Gary.
Okay, thank you. And then
Commissioner Anderson, follow-up.
A lot of times I've seen in the past where this excess parkland is governed by statute, by state law or what have you. And I might be wrong on this, but so please share with me if I am wrong on this. But it's for runoff and the water table and the runoff with so much development in an area, you want some place for the water to pool. I know that was an issue by some of the development down over by the Serbian church, I believe, a few places over there, and again with Fox over at by the Margaret Leary School, that there was an awful lot of issue with the water table over there with the street flooding and everything else that we had. And I remember talking in great length with Matt Moore when he was running stormwater before for the county on these issues. So this piece of parkland here that was set aside, it seems like it's pretty much undevelopable in a sense from what some of the neighbors have seen. I don't know, I'm not a developer, but with the granite and everything, if they deemed it undevelopable at that time and turned it into parkland for that reason, is that the case, or was those ordinances in place at that time? And then a follow-up to that, it all kind of blends together. When we're looking at the stormwater and these extra developments with the payment in lieu of these little parklets, or what you want to call them, and getting rid of them, how does that affect our water table and the runoff?
Commissioner Anderson, Director Carring.
All right, thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Anderson. So there are two things that they are separate from one another. Under the Montana state statute, subdivisions are required to provide park land based upon a percentage, depending upon the size of their subdivision, when there are 6 or more units. That regulation was in fact in place in the time period when this addition was added. Stormwater, or the provision of managing municipal stormwater, was an ordinance that was passed by Butte-Silver in 2013. And prior to that point in time, stormwater had not been required for management in Silver Bow County. Without having reviewed the subdivision files of either subdivision ahead of this meeting, I cannot say why there may have been stormwater issues at the subdivision that you are referring to. However, we do not at this time have parkland serving as stormwater control. That would be a separate design requirement to fulfill. In some instances, I think JP or Chief Executive Gallagher discussed this, that there are many subdivisions that have given the most undesirable property over as parkland, and it happens to be a place where stormwater flows may naturally run, and so that may be one of the challenges that you might be describing.
Thank you, Director Crane. I think it was, oh, you're okay? Okay. Commissioner Morgan. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I just want to bring up that we have to remember as a council that the communication before us is with Mr. Jeffries, not subdivision rules, regulations, and laws, because we don't have that in front of us. County Attorney Enruth can correct me if I'm wrong, but the communication before us doesn't dive into subdivision laws and changes. So,
thank you, Commissioner Morgan. And if you want to answer to that, County Attorney Enruth.
Yes, Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Morgan, that is correct. We're starting to dive into two completely separate things.
Thank you.
What is before the council tonight is a request to sell a piece of parkland property through the process that has occurred. There's nothing that has occurred that is going to say that there is even going to be a subdivision on it. They haven't got to that step yet. In addition to that, I want to make something else clear to the commission prior to making a vote, because the commission has spoken tonight about selling it or possibly denying the communication tonight and then allowing a neighboring individual to purchase the property and keeping it park land. Under ordinance 3.28.020, the commissioners may sell that piece of property. However, if you do so, you shall consider the additional factors, including but not limited to the economic benefit and sale to the city county, the property's value, and most importantly in that specific section is the city county's growth policy. That is a policy that was voted on by this commission, which specifically states that we are in need of housing. So I highly recommend that the commissioners, while voting, keep that part of the law in mind.
Thank you, County Attorney Enruth. Commissioner Mankins.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher, and thank you, County Attorney Enruth, and thank you, Director Crane. With that, yeah, absolutely right, getting into the weeds. I think it's just time to call for the vote on this. It doesn't mean where Commissioner O'Leary stated at the beginning of this, that definitely has a ton of validity depending on this next vote. So I think that calling for the vote to deny this and to get this vote out of the way to see where we can go further if we're going to relook at after the vote. Yeah.
Okay. So we have a motion to call for the vote. Do we need a second on the call for the vote? Okay, so we have a motion, but so can he make two motions? So I want to make sure that we're following proper order.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
County Attorney, is that proper procedure that we could do that?
Chief Executive Gallagher and Commissioner Morgan and I both just looked at each other. While it's not necessarily written that way, I do believe it's the proper way to bring it back to the council's attention.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion and a second to call for the vote. So what we're doing right now is we're voting to call for the vote. So that's all that, so you either approve or deny the call for the vote. Okay, so could commissioners please vote?
Just on the question.
Okay, on the question, Commissioner Morgan.
Just so we know what this motion
Oh, yeah,
is.
so the motion to call for the vote, we're at the very first, or the second motion, which is to deny, right?
No. So,
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Morgan.
thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. The motion that Mr. Mankins made is to basically a motion to end discussion and ask us to proceed to a vote. So a yay vote would say, yes, let's end discussion and then proceed to his motion.
Yes.
A no vote would say, discussion is full and open and we can
Gotcha.
continue.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification. So a yay vote is to end discussion. Okay. All right. Could commissioners,
Thanks.
Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I just have a question. I believe this is not in relation to the communication. This is an administrative vote, correct? So we probably.
So we need to correct
Yay or
that
nay?
on the.
Or do we raise our hands or?
Shall we just do a call vote? We'll just do a call vote on this. So this is a yay vote is to end discussion and call for the vote. So all those in favor signal by aye. Opposed? Okay. 2 nay. So we had 9 yay, 2 nay. Okay. And do you have which commissioners did what there?
I mean, we can, if we want to get this recorded as part of the minutes, we can have people just check in as to, their yay or nay, and I can close this vote.
Okay.
For the call to vote.
Okay. So just check in on and then we'll record it. All right. And clerk, please record the vote.
9 yay, 2 nay.
9 yay, 2 nay, motion passes. Now we go to the substitute motion, which was Commissioner Mankin's motion to deny communication number 2025-141 and place on file. Is there anything else on the question? Could commissioners please? And clerk, please record the vote.
5 yay, 6 nay.
5 yea, 6 nay, motion fails. So now we go back to the original motion, which is to send back to the Community Development Department for a developer's package. So this to refer back to the Community Development Department and to bring forth the developer's package. Okay. I think we've ended discussion though. Oh, you can question the motion. Okay, Commissioner Mankins, making sure we're following proper procedure here.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. So with that motion that Commissioner O'Leary made, and with Director Crane still here, Director Crane, can you explain a little bit more the developer's package to everyone and how it is structured? And if anybody thinks that they should possibly maybe put some parameters or put something in place. I can't remember because it's been like 20, 30 minutes since Commissioner O'Leary stated this, that maybe we need to put some more parameters in when it goes back to community development in this package.
Commissioner Mankins, Director Crane.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Mankins, I just want to preface this by saying that community development of government-owned property is a developer's packet that is typically handled by the Community Development Office. And so this is the first time that I have interpreted this ordinance. But I do think that it does have some provisions that are very important for you to know about, and I think would then be your opportunity to provide guidance to the executive staff as we prepare the developer's packet. There are some definitions, but essentially what we require here in these proposals is to, and I'm going to read to you guys, so please don't fall asleep. Developer's packet means a specification drawn up by the government of Butte-Silver Bow delineating the government's requirement for the submission of proposals. The packet shall contain as a minimum the following: a statement of the purpose and objective for the development of the subject parcel or parcels. So an intention. What do you want to see there? A legal description of the property proposed for development and any covenants running with the property, as well as any covenants proposed to be placed on the property. The type of development or improvements, if any, which are unacceptable. Special requirements, if any, such as time of performance, duration of options, etc. The management and maintenance services required to be provided by the owner, if applicable. Delineation of any federal, state, or local laws or regulations with which the developer must comply. A form to be completed by the proposed purchaser to show the developer, the project architect, the management agent, and the proposed owner the qualifications and experience of those people and the names of the officials and principal members, shareholders, or investors, or other parties having substantial interest, and any other information which the government deems pertinent to a particular development.
Thank you, Director Crane. Follow-up, Commissioner Mankins, or?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So Chief Executive Gallagher, and I guess I'm going to ask Commissioner O'Leary, you did say something about a market appraisal, because you did start talking about 40 to your next property that you found was 120. So do you feel that that would be something to add to your,
Commissioner Mankins.
just with a market appraisal and it is being used for housing?
Okay,
I mean,
Commissioner Mankins, Commissioner O'Leary.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Mankins, I don't know if that's necessarily our role right at the moment. I ultimately, this would be maybe a question for our Community Development Department. I think that if we send this off to the Community Development Department, they put out a request for developers packets, we will get back some proposals, and I assume that those will include some kind of purchase price. Maybe the Community Development Department could set a price ahead of time. I just don't know how that would play out, but.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Leary. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Director Crane, it is state law that any property that a local government sells has to be at appraised value. Okay, I'm gonna go to County Attorney Enruth.
So let's go to County Attorney Enruth here on this.
Commissioner Morgan, the statute states that you may sell it by auction, exchange, or direct sell by 2/3 votes. And then when doing so, you can look at the Montana Department of Revenue's market value. That is, you are to consider it, but you may sell it for more.
Thank you, County
That, I
Attorney.
mean, and that's, I mean, you can see that in the auction language. Obviously, if you've got two people bidding in conjunction to a developer's packet, someone's obviously going to come in higher. But I do think you can also set a base of the Montana Department of Revenue's market value, yes.
Thank you, County Attorney Andrews. Commissioner Morgan.
Just to follow up to that, you can go higher as we've done before. You can't go lower though.
Okay, yeah, Commissioner Morgan, County Attorney Andrews.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Morgan, the law states that you shall consider the Montana Department's market value. It does not say that you are required to go buy it. You are just simply to give it consideration. There's nothing in the statute or in our ordinance that is in conjunction with 7-8 4201 Montana Code Annotated that states that we cannot go below a certain value. It's just that it needs to be taken into consideration.
Thank you, County Attorney Andrews. Commissioner Mankins.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. I mean, just for I know that we keep on saying assume, so I'm going to direct this back to Director,
Crane.
Director Crane. We don't want to lose money on this or go like you're saying, but like I'm trying to say, a fair market. And if Commissioner O'Leary said that he found the same exact thing, kind of the same way for 140, and if that was the fair market, hopefully that is something that is in that community development or that developer's package if we're going this route.
Commissioner Mankins, is that a question to Director Crane? Director Crane.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Mankins, I think that it is wise to look at the developer's packet as a economic development or community development tool that we as a local government have available to us. And while we have Montana Department of Revenue assessed value of this property in the area of $40,000, you may look to sell the property for appraised value. However, I think it's also the consideration of the additional investment that a developer would be making on the property that would theoretically create additional, let's say, residential units that would become single-family homes or duplexes or something of that nature that would then have a taxable value that would not be an exempt tax value, which we are currently using to evaluate the price of this property, but rather like you would any market rate home, which would in turn generate additional tax revenue to the local government in addition to also having roofs over additional families' heads. So there is a benefit there to take into consideration as well.
Thank you, Director Crane. Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you, Chief Executive. One comment I want to make on that too, when the developer package comes out, if we do go that route, there won't be a price on it. This will be kind of a bid thing. So it'll be, if you have 5 people bid on it, they're going to be, you're shaking your head no, she's shaking her head yes. So I don't know who's wrong or right. However, I'm going to state my comment. Kind of remember when we sold East Broadway or Up Top bought the lot? So there technically was no, I don't recall there's any price, but price or not, high, low, whatever it goes for, the opportunity for other people to be involved in this process is the main thing. Obviously, I hope that we don't go through this and somebody offers 20, then it'd be a bad deal. But it's going to be the developer, they'll have to put in all their plans and everything and then offer the price for that. So I don't know. Here's my question finally. Can we keep that, say, hey, it has to be at least 40,000 of what?
Commissioner O'Neill, Director Crane.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner O'Neill, I think that I would defer to the county attorney's language, which is that you must consider that price.
Thank you. Commissioner Shea, and then Commissioner O'Leary.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. We are not obligated to accept any or all of the developer packets. If we get developers packets that come in that we don't feel either meet with the comprehensive plan, or we feel that we're being lowballed, we're not obligated to offer those. That was what I was shaking my head about. And like I believe County Attorney Andrews said, we can set the price where we want, but we should consider at least selling it for the assessed value. But we can say, place a reserve on that to say we want at least 100,000. This is a random number. We can place a reserve on the developer's packet to say, we're going to put this out for development, but don't even submit if it's not at least 100,000, you know, something like that. Am I misunderstanding or misstating anything, or just trying to kind of bring
Commissioner
it all back
Shea
together?
and County Attorney Enruth, can you answer that question?
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Shea, that is correct. And everybody here, just so we're all aware, we're trying to, you know, put the cart before the horse. This commission needs to remember that you have the final vote. So whether you put a baseline number on it or not, you still get to say yes or no. So if all of the bid packets come in and there isn't one of them in which everybody on this commission can agree by a 2/3 vote, excuse me, not everybody, but a 2/3 vote, say, we will accept this bid packet at this price for this proposal, it dies. So that's where everybody needs to remember, we're, rather than putting all of the, you know, you're trying to put all these limitations in the bid packets themselves, or in the proposals, you simply at the end can just say no. And I think that's what Mr. O'Leary was getting at, is these proposals are meant to be more open than restricted to allow everybody to come in with their own price and their own proposal. But again, we can also, or excuse me, this commission can also recommend, please set a baseline price of X.
Thank you, County Attorney Enruth. Commissioner O'Leary.
I guess first just a comment, and then I'm going to ask a question of the county attorney. So originally, the reason why this land ended up in Butte-Silver's hands was because we had this requirement that parkland had to be part of a subdivision. So the idea is to get parks into neighborhoods, and we have a very nice park adjacent to this called Copper Mountain. And I know that this neighborhood has had a long-standing desire to have a really good connection between the neighborhood and Copper Mountain Park. So just, I guess maybe this is a comment for staff. If we do go the development route, I would like to see some of the money used to finish that connection and make it a really robust connection so that that neighborhood has access to a good park. So that's comment number one. Question for the county attorney is, I wouldn't be opposed to just putting a provision in here that requires any proposal to come to us with at least the appraised price. Can I amend my motion to include that provision?
Commissioner O'Leary, County Attorney Enruth.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner O'Leary, and Commissioner Morgan, just correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he can.
That's correct. Yeah. So as long as the same.
You'll have to make the motion and second it.
So Commissioner O'Leary, would you like to amend your motion?
Yes. So I will amend my motion to read, refer communication 25-141 to community development to go through the developer's package process and report back to the council with recommendations, with the specific caveat that all proposals at least come with a purchase price of an appraised value as determined by an appraiser in Butte-Silver.
So, okay, you'll second the amendment. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to amend the motion to add that it must have the appraised value added to the motion. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Just to clarify, your motion mentioned an appraisal by an appraiser instead of Montana Department of Revenue's meeting. That implies to me, voting on this motion, that it would have to be a hired appraisal to use it rather than just a Montana Department of Revenue low bid, and then from there it can be higher. So just on the question.
Commissioner Morgan, and so who's that question go to?
Mr. Chief Executive, well, nobody, but.
Okay. I thought there was a question.
The motion, I think, is too defined. It almost
person.
needs to be just a appraised value based on what Ms. Crane mentioned is kind of the setting point. Just so if she comes back with, if they come back with a recommendation of 40,000 based on Montana Department of Revenue, they really are in violation of your motion because your motion stated a hired appraiser. And so that's going to throw the flag. So, you know me, I like procedures.
Yeah. Commissioner Morgan. So Commissioner O'Leary.
Yes, and I guess the reason why I made the motion that way is because anybody who's been around the state appraisals for any amount of time will understand that they're way below market value. They're always below market value. I guess I would like this to sell for market value for the most benefit for our Parks Department. Wouldn't bother me if we had a lower threshold, but I would like to see that sale be at a price that is actual market rate. It may be a question for our planning director.
Commissioner Morgan, or Commissioner O'Leary, I believe then that would require staff to go and get an appraisal of that property. So with that motion, that would require us to get an appraisal of that, of the property prior to us doing the developer's package. Okay. Commissioner Thatcher and then Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. Personally, I disagree. I mean, who pays? So Butte-Silver Boat pays for an appraisal on a property that we're trying to sell already? That makes no sense in my mind. I think that we should take the value that we've already been assessed and not lose money on, I mean, appraisals cost money. And why are we taking that cost on? We're trying to sell this property to generate revenue. Why are we paying for something? I disagree. With that, I'd like to make a substitute motion to refer to community development for a developer's packet with the caveat that we use the assessed rate from the state.
Commissioner Thatcher, I don't believe we can do a substitute motion because there was already a substitute motion made to that earlier that we took action on. Commissioner Shea.
If I may ask Commissioner O'Leary, because this is the world that he operates in, what's a ballpark for an appraisal?
Commissioner Shea, Commissioner O'Leary, if you could answer that.
I mean, I don't know if this will fall under commercial or not, but somewhere between $500 and $1,000, probably.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Leary. So I'm going to go Commissioner Callahan, then Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. I think we're really getting deep into the weeds here. I think the whole goal was give it to the highest bidder. So there's a good chance we're going to be much higher than the state's appraised value anyway.
Thanks. Commissioner Callahan, are you good? Commissioner Thatcher, Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. That's where I believe that 100% that it's probably worth more than whatever it's worth, but when it gets developed, where the county's going to make their money is going to be from the taxes and the other houses up there and the development of it. My thing with hiring another appraiser is what appraiser do we hire? Like how do we flip a coin to who gets that? I'm sure there's a process for that, but that's concerning to me. And also, there's a reason why when we sell a land, we go off the tax value because that's what it is. Whether it's a good deal or a bad deal, it is what it is. Just remember, we're getting that money. We didn't pay anything for this land in theory, right? It was donated to us, so I'm on the other side too. I want as much money as possible as well, but I don't know. That's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Neill. Commissioner Mankins.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I agree with Commissioner O'Leary. I think the East Park went for somewhere around $65,000. I think we all know who was the person that we paid to do it, and I don't think there was any discussion on that certain piece of property and who appraised it at that time. That was not brought up that was an issue. Everybody knows at this time that 65 was not enough as what it should have been, and it's still not developed. So I wholeheartedly agree with Commissioner O'Leary that this needs to be a fair market appraisal because it is way too low to be sold for $40,000.
Commissioner Mankins, I'm going to go to Commissioner Thatcher, and then I'm coming over here. Who's got their, is it you? Okay.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. I just think we're setting a poor precedent if we are getting into the business of real estate and hiring on every extra parcel or every property that Butte-Silver owns. So we want to go out and pay appraisers to appraise the property when we already have the tax assessed value. That, in my mind, that's poor business. I think that that's poor business. I don't know.
Thank you, Commissioner Thatcher. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive, members of council. The elephant in the room that I have is who's paying for the appraisal? What budget is it coming out of for $1,000? I know it can be found. I know it might be able to be in your budget, but at the end of the day, if we use the state's appraised value and the developments come in and we feel that it should be higher than 40, we can deny it and then go back out with a different plan. So,
Thank you, Commissioner Morgan. Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. If I understand the county attorney correctly, we can do every single developer's packet differently. We are not bound to, if we ask for an appraised value, I'll pay for it myself if I have to. But if we ask for an appraised value on this property this time, that doesn't mean we have to do that next time if we find a property that's less desirable, in a more inconvenient location or something like that. I think that we are, again, way too far into the weeds trying to figure out what each of our understandings is of the statutes and the ordinances, and I don't think this is the time or the place for that discussion. So I would respectfully make a motion to call for the vote again, because I feel like we called for the vote like 45 minutes ago. Okay. But yeah, I think we need to make a decision, and with the understanding we can deny anything that comes before us. We can accept anything. This isn't a bidding war. We aren't bound to saying, well, you were the highest bidder, you get it, even though you only bid $20,000. If there's an issue with the community development department or the planning department where they can't allocate or identify the funds, then that would be a question for the council, since we hold the purse strings and we can figure that out. But again, I'll reiterate my motion to call for the vote.
Okay, we have a motion to call for the vote. We have a motion to call for a vote, and it's been seconded. So this is, if you vote yes, then this ends all discussion. And then, so a vote for yes is to end all discussion. Could commissioners please? And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
11 yea, 0 nay. 0 nay.
11 yea, 0 nay. Motion passes. Now we go back to the motion, and this is to send communication number 2025-141 to the Community Development Department for a developer's package with an appraisal attached to that. So it needs an appraised value to that. Yes, right. Okay, Commissioner O'Leary, making
if I
sure
could,
that's-
just a clarification for everybody. Can I ask Director Crane a quick question about this?
Yeah, we called for the vote. Yeah, we did. We called for the vote.
We allowed questions last time.
Mostly a question on the motion.
Okay, so question of the motion. Go ahead.
Director Crane, do you think that there is? I want to make sure that we are not putting a burden on your department. Is there money in the land sales budget to pay for an appraisal?
Commissioner O'Leary, Director Crane.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner O'Leary, I believe I can find $1,000.
Thank you, Director Crane. Okay. Okay. So with that answered the question. So let's the motion is to send to community development for a developer's package with an appraised value. Could commissioners please vote? And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
9 yea, 2 nay.
9 yea, 2 nay, motion passes. Moving on. To item number 21, communication number 2025-156, Dory Skokrud, Community Development Coordinator, requesting Council of Commissioners authorization to have Chief Executive Gallagher sign a grant agreement from the Montana Department of Commerce HB 355 SLIPA grant program for the Greenway maintenance grant in the amount of $39,552. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I'm going to make sure that I can hold this communication for at least a half hour. I'm just kidding. So on this communication, I don't have an issue with the amount. Obviously, we're asking for approval or budget to accept grant money. My overall question on this one was to ask Ms. Skokrud what the long-term maintenance plan was for the parks or for the Greenway Trail, just so this body knew what that would look like, because, you know, on this particular one, $39,000 is a lot of money, but in the whole grand scheme of things, it's really not for the whole maintenance of that Greenway Trail. It did come to my attention that she is out sick today, so I, as a commissioner, will continue to ask her that question and get that answered. So it was just for that communication part. So with her being absent, I would make a motion when Commissioner Shea gets back that we concur with communication 2025-156 and place on file.
We have a motion and a second to concur and place on file communication number 2025-156. Commissioner Callahan.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. I guess my question would be, I think Mr. Gallagher could probably answer this. Isn't the Greenway Trail funded by ARCO funds? The maintenance is covered under those funds?
Commissioner Callahan, the Greenway Trail was actually funded by NRD, which really technically was funded by ARCO dollars originally, but through NRD, and so those dollars there has been an ongoing maintenance of it, but this there was the funding is running then, so there's the long-term maintenance of this is at issue, and so that there's going to need to be more funding to this as well, but we're trying to get the funding allocated to complete the trail. And so that's kind of where we're at on this, but a lot of this has to do with where some of that funding has come from and where we're going to go, but yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and we got Commissioner Shea back. So we have a motion and a second to concur and place on file communication number 2025-15. Is there anything else on the question? Could commissioners please vote? And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
11 yea, 0 nay. 0 nay.
11 yea, 0 nay. Motion passes. Now we need to move to, I gotta find them. They're here somewhere. Oh, here we go. We'll move to communication number 2025-162, application for Climate Smart Communities Grant due by March 21st, 2025. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. This communication was added to tonight's agenda, as everyone knows. It is stated in the communication that it is for the amount of $100,000 with no match required. So that part is taken care of. So I'll make a motion that we concur with communication 2025-162 and place on file.
We have a motion and a second to place communication 2025-162 on to concur and place on file. Is there anything on the question? Could commissioners please vote? And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
11 yea, 0 nay.
11
0 nay.
11 yea, 0 nay, motion passes. Moving on to communication number 2025-163, application for environmental justice planning grant for the Father Sheehan Park due March 31st, 2025. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Similar thing in the communication. It is for a grant request of $350,000. It is stated there is no match required. So I'll make a motion that we concur with communication 2025, place on file.
There's a motion and a second to concur and place on file communication number 2025-164. Is there anything on the question? Could commissioners please vote? And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
11 yea, 0 nay.
11 yea, 0 nay, motion passes. Moving on to communication number 2025-164, application for environmental justice planning grant for Father Sheehan Park due March 31st. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Similar to the other two, it is for a grant request for $250,000. As stated, no match required. I'll make a motion that we concur with communication 2025-164 and place on file.
We have a motion to concur in place number 2025-164. Is there anything on the question? Could commissioners please vote? Commissioner Morgan?
Oh.
And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
11 yea, 0 nay.
11 yea, 0 nay, motion passes. Moving on to Section 3, ordinances and resolutions introduced to judiciary. We have 3 of them there. Section 4, ordinances and resolutions for final reading. We have one, Council Bill number 2025-01 and ordinance number 2025-01. Clerk, please read the caption.
An ordinance amending section 17.06.030 of Butte-Silver Municipal Code, BSBMC, which section adopted the zoning map of Butte-Silver, State of Montana, providing for a change to the official zoning district map by rezoning approximately 2.07 acres from M1 light industrial to C-2 community commercial, commonly located at 4115 Wynn Avenue, located west of Harrison Avenue. The east boundary of the parcel is adjacent to Wynn Avenue, and the west boundary is adjacent to the CSMP Railroad near Ram Street. The subject area comprises one property as sub 14, section 06, township 02, north, range 07 west, lot 45. See attached map, Appendix A, of the city and county of Butte-Silver, State of Montana, providing for the repeal of all parts of ordinances in conflict herewith and providing for an effective date herein.
Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I move to place Council Bill number 2025-01, ordinance number 2025-01 on final reading and passed, having been deemed fully read at length.
We have a motion and a second, place Council Bill number 2025-01, 25-01 on final reading. Is there anything on the question? Could commissioners please vote? And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
11 yea, 0 nay.
11 yea, 0 nay, motion passes. Moving on to Section 5, ordinance and resolution for emergency suspension of the rules. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. The Commission will acknowledge that we did have a public hearing on this exact thing earlier today. And in light of a deadline of March 31st, that's why it's on for emergency suspension of the rules. So at this time, I move for the suspension of the rules for the purpose of passing Council Resolution 2025-13 by waiving subsection 7 of Rule 36 of the Rules and Order of the Council of Commissioners, thereby having it considered for advanced passage without reference to the Judiciary Committee.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules for resolution number 2025-13. Is there anything on the question? Could commissioners please vote? And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
11 yea, 0 nay.
11 yea, 0 nay, motion passes. Motion passes. Moving to resolution number 2025-13. Clerk, please read the caption.
A resolution amending the budget during the fiscal year after conducting a public hearing at a regularly scheduled meeting of the Council of Commissioners in accordance with Section 7-6-4006 MCA, appropriating unanticipated revenue to the City County of Butte-Silver from Montana Department of Health and Human Services and providing for an effective date herein.
Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. At this time, I'll move to place Council Resolution 2025-13 on final reading and passed, having been deemed fully read at length.
We have a motion and a second. Number 2025-13 on final reading. Is there anything on the question? Could commissioners please vote? Would anyone, whoops, Commissioner O'Leary, I don't think yours popped. And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
11 yea, 0 nay.
11 yea, 0 nay, motion passes. Moving on to calendar and other meeting and events, please note all of the times and places of those meetings. Next, we'll move on to any public comment on any item that is not on the agenda tonight. Welcome, Ms. Sullivan.
Good evening, Kelly Sullivan, 1421 West Diamond Street. Good evening, Chief Executive Gallagher and members of the council. You can see I brought you invitations tonight to our community event on April 1st. I wanted to invite you personally. We are in the midst of developing our 5-year strategic plan, and your input is critical to our mission. So I hope you'll all give us a chance on April 1st and stop by Butte Brewing at 5:30. And that is all I have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Is there any other public comment on any item that is not on the agenda? Seeing none, I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.